And yet where is all the focus within our educational establishment at the moment is about changing structures, not about hitting the low-hanging fruit where we know that we can have the most effect. But if we go beyond that, if we're saying that working with teachers and developing their skills is critical and central and important, are we doing anything effectively in that area? This is curious research. Just 0.5% of the budget is on CPD. Minimal. 50% of the 5% is on cover costs for sending people out on courses. And only 30%, 37% of schools rarely or never actually evaluate the impact of CPD on the teacher, let alone on the outcomes for pupils. I don't know if you came across that Tim Brickhouse and Tony Moon article which came out Tuesday. I mean, it really is that recent. It's worth looking up. I've tweeted it out a few times, and it's about taking teacher development seriously. And they lambast the CPD models that we use in this country. It's a scathing attack. To me, it's very justified. One of the things that I hadn't realised is that we only have spent about 5 days a year on CPD, which is only a third of the international average on CPD. The international average is 15 days. If you actually look at the highest achieving school systems, they spend very, very much more than that as well.
So can I just ask the background of Brighouse and Moon? They're writing from what direction?
Well, so Tim Brickhouse, he was in charge of London Challenge. He was famously described by Portillo as wandering around Birmingham scaring children. Very forceful ex-director of education, and Moon is actually a researcher.
Thank you.
He's going to be launching quite an interesting campaign at the NAHT, National Association of Head Teachers conference coming up in March, where he's actually going to be talking about mobilising the education force in order to take responsibility for professional development.
Thank you.
Having said those things about the importance of CPD, what is actually effective CPD? And there are, I think, a number of pitfalls. It's very easy to take all the data and then focus on human capital, invest in the individual teacher. And I think there are 3 types of capital, aren't there? There's human capital, what we invest in individual teachers, sending them off on one-day courses, doing MAs with them. Then there's social capital, the work of people like Carrie Liana, which is actually looking at the importance of staff rooms and how staff rooms impact on the changes of teachers. And in fact, Carrie Liana's work has suggested that you get more bangs for your bucks by actually investing in staff rooms than you do in individual teachers. But then there's that whole idea that's coming through from Fulham and others, which is actually looking at professional capital, which is a merging of human capital, but then unearthing that and sharing it within the staff room. Has people come across that concept of the knowledge-creating company? It's actually looking at the Japanese models in companies. There is a huge amount of talent, there's a massive amount of skills within each staff room, within each company, within each organisation. And it's a way of unlocking that and sharing it so that everybody has access to that. And as a consequence, the whole improves. So this isn't some sort of wishy-washy liberal concept of let's all collaborate and be friendly with each other. It's actually rooted in very hard commerce, that if we want to be most effective, we actually ensure that we use all the skills that are available to us. Carrie Liana's work, she's got, if you go onto YouTube, she's got a couple of really good YouTube things. And just look up Carrie Liana, and it's called The Missing Link in School Reform. I really do recommend that as a quick look. For me, that is the key. And that's Hargreaves and Shirley from 2010. That the inspiring future of school improvement lies in the fear factor giving away to the peer factor. In other words, the focus stops being on the individual, but we start talking about that whole concept of collaboration, working together, ensuring that we drive improvement from within staff rooms. So if I've said that there are failings within traditional CPD, I think it's sorry about this. I think it's because an awful lot of that means that we haven't really understood andragogy, adult learning. And this is what the basis of all our research has been about. What is actually effective learning for adults? Well, none of it is really rocket science, because I think instinctively as teachers we know this. It's about modelling, observation, coaching. Those have enormous impact. Mentoring, self-review, developing professional dialogue within schools, sharing in communities of practice, exploring and researching, teaching. That whole idea that if we teach something, we learn it. And I'll bring that together in a cycle in a minute. But all of that requires professional collaboration between members of staff. In reality, how much of that actually happens? Very often, the drive-by CPD is still dominant, where most of the money goes on teaching, on CPD for adults. Or bringing in the expert for the odd half-hour talk or an hour's talk at the beginning of term. Let me capture that in a diagram. This is a very simple model. It was a very simple model. I hope you all caught it. Let me go back to it. I don't know about you, but I didn't start off as a brilliant teacher. I'm not sure I landed up as a brilliant teacher. I actually put out a tweet recently which actually got quite a bit of response, which was, as a teacher, I was always okay, I was often good, and I was occasionally brilliant. I was never always brilliant. I was never always an outstanding teacher. And, does anyone here ever think they've been outstanding all through their career? And every time I've changed job, I've gone back a notch. So, went out of classroom teaching into being a head and then went on from being a head. And I always went back a notch. But how much actual support did I get in coaching and mentoring and support in that way? When I started teaching in the classroom, my head of department, Roger, he was a lovely bloke. He sort of said, I've got to come and observe you. And he scuttled into the back of my classroom. He spent 20 minutes, said that was great, and disappeared. I never got observed again until HMI came round. And I had 3 HMI visits in 2 terms. And they never gave any feedback whatsoever. Other than that, in my career, I've never been observed, I've never been coached, I've never been mentored. All the way through. So, when you start, you're fair, you need scaffolding. How do you learn that? Modelling. Now, I don't know about you again, but some of the modelling that I've had has been good. Some of it has been utterly bizarre. You need coaching. As you develop, you get good. You need reflection, you need self-review, you need the coaching still. And as you become great, you start to develop communities of practice. You get yourself involved in research. Again, a huge gap, I think, in a lot of CPD within England, in particularly. If you look at the highest achieving countries, they involve themselves a lot in the research which is going in, action research, what's happening in the classroom, how to evolve that. When you start to get outstanding, you're still doing that research and you're doing the other things, but you start to teach and coach yourself. So it's about head teachers actually identifying the skill and the talent within their system, releasing it so that they take part in the modelling and the coaching and the supporting of teachers who are further down on their career ladder or in that cycle of development. Does that echo with you or not? Does that feel the sort of approach? So for me, if we're going to develop systems which are actually going to enable all that to happen, we need something which goes beyond the physical presence of a teacher the whole time. Terribly expensive to do that unless you start using technology. the whole idea of coaching and modelling. Do you really want 3 NQTs sitting in your classroom the entire time so they can watch what you're doing? Do you actually want to do coaching live all the time? It's an incredibly expensive resource to allow a teacher to come in and do that sort of level of coaching. It's also incredibly intrusive, having somebody in there. Sorry, Roger. I'm using Roger's sound system, obviously covering it up. Reflection, peer review. All of these are interactions that need to be enabled for things to be effective. But can they actually be done without using technology? And that's where we started doing our work in IRIS. We wanted to start looking at how could we create a system. Have you had one of those days?
I think the word irony applies.
Just relax, just don't move. So when we started thinking about how we were going to evolve technology, we knew it was going to involve video cameras. Very dangerous thing to have in your classroom, a video camera. Are you being observed, or actually is it going to be empowering? We knew it had to be mobile. You didn't want a CCTV camera in every classroom. If you have a CCTV camera in every classroom, you're going away from that idea of it being teacher empowered to actually being part of the accountability framework. We knew it had to be cloud-based. If we're talking about sharing best practice and resources, you can't do that stuck within one school system. If you put it up on the cloud, then actually you can share it between multiple locations. So, we're working on a little project at the moment with a school in South Yorkshire, lifetime in-ear coaching, sharing with a school in West Sussex, in Worthing. They're actually sharing practice on a very regular basis. Most dramatic example is that we set up somewhere in Dagenham, sharing with somewhere in Sydney, Australia, where they were actually sharing libraries of best practice. We knew it had to be teacher-friendly and the teacher had to feel in control. So one of the basics on that system was that if you are observed, then actually the ownership of that video is yours. It goes into your personal library. It doesn't go into the observer's library, and you choose who you share it with. And you can share it with somebody in the school, the observer, or somebody in another country if they're actually within the same system. But the teacher remains in control. We knew it had to enable contextualized feedback. Just a video stream doesn't work. So actually, you have to meta tag comments and actions against exactly the things that are happening as you're watching them. We knew that it had to have very effective tools for analysis and comment, so that actually you can get a deep texture of what you're looking at. And it needed to provide objective data for analysis. It needed to be flexible in the way that the school uses it. There's no point at all in having a system which can only be used in one particular way. It has to be very flexible, and it has to be cost efficient. But if you actually think about the wastage, hidden wastage, in traditional CPD, that's where you're going to go with it. So what I'd like to do is then have a look at the system itself and take you through to see how all that unravels in practice. Now this means I'm going to have to turn my back a lot because we haven't actually cracked the technology of having it in front of us. The table's behind me. Are there any questions? Sorry, Roger. Are there any questions or comments on that first part? No? Okay.
One comment, Graham.
Yes.
It seems, although I might be wrong, as if there was an assumption of a hierarchy within it. And I was struck by your comment that as you move from one job to another, your own competence seemed to slide. You had to build it up again. And it struck me that the problem with looking at an iterative cycle like that is it presumes someone starts and then moves up as they progress through their career.
Can I just say that the reason it's shaped like that is because I didn't crack the technology in order to create a spiral. If I were more competent in drawing diagrams, that would have been an action, almost like an action research spiral, and that's the way it would have looked. And it would have slid and done all sorts of pretty things. So I totally agree with what you're saying. You don't always go back to basics, but you still come round again. I know that as a head, you know, I had to learn a whole new set of skills, really. And, you know, as I went on from being a head, I had to learn skills again.
And did you ever get feedback from your junior teachers?
If I were doing it now, I would probably set that up as part of my model of my own professional
I
development.
never did.
No, and I wish I had.
Yeah.
The nearest I got to feedback was sort of reading the comments written on the toilet walls, which did actually happen on one occasion. But yeah, so no, I didn't have a formalised 360 degree, and I think 360 degree can be very, very valuable, evaluation and peer evaluation. I don't think I even did enough sort of peer evaluation at various times either. So we said it was a secure system. You've got a personalised login, you've got your own secret password, it brings you into what almost any sort of social networking site. When a video has been made, it goes into an observations library. I could schedule a live observation. I can choose, I want to be observed. I fill that in, it sends an email through a system to the person I want to observe me. If they don't agree, the camera doesn't turn on. I want to be an observer, same thing. If you don't agree to being observed, the camera doesn't turn on. Or I actually want to observe myself. So again, that's empowering the teacher rather than the other way around. I have here, and I'm hoping this is working because the internet's dipping in and out, a live view back to our office, which has been enabled by them, I would say. They've actually accepted it. So this is actually our office at Sussex. I'm remotely controlling this camera.
It's empty because we're all here.
And I'm remotely controlling it with a mouse, which I hate. But I mean, just showing you that you get that sort of level of detail. You can zoom in, you can zoom out. If Charlotte was there, I can work out what she's writing, with her permission. Once the observation has been made, all right, I can make comments whilst I'm observing. So I can make a comment. I then add that comment. That comment goes there, and that is meta tagged to that exact spot in the video. I'll go to one that we've done before. So once that's been done, the video is uploaded to the cloud into the library of the person who's been observed. It can then be pulled down. This is one that's been done before. Have a look, the history one. This is the first time this teacher's been observed.
About the past, yes.
And he's a lovely bloke.
And all those things are historical sources.
But I've got to turn the sound on.
Our key skill is to start using them to find information.
Right. Good quality sound. First time he's been observed, the first time the class has been observed, and it's in a challenging area, and it's the first time the person using the camera has ever used the camera either. So I mean, this is really quite raw. You see that glowing yellow? That's that point in the video. And as it goes through, it goes yellow as you get to that point in the video. Actually, I want to go back to that point in the video, so I click that, and it takes me back to that spot as well. So those are comments that I've made. If I wanted to add to those comments, I click on it. I can comment on a comment. We had a system, and I think, is Tony around there still? No. Tony Sharpcross was doing a little bit of research, putting teachers into, oh there he is, putting them into triads, didn't you? Where they were commenting on each other's lessons, and they were actually building up a very iterative relationship, or an iterative set of comments, around one small clip, and I can see a real value in that, so that you're actually sharing.
We made sure that triads were coming from different faculties or different departments, so that people were actually going out of the comfort zone to some extent.
Yeah.
to see practice in other areas.
So, somebody was doing a piece of work not long ago where they were putting a very experienced teacher and an NQT and a mid-range teacher all together. And actually what was interesting it was the very experienced teacher that was coming back and saying, I got real value out of listening to that, and actually doing that analysis. If you wanted to, you've done that. You've actually done your observation, you've done your piece of work, and it's been fed back. And one of the things that's come out is actually my questioning needs a bit of honing up. So what am I going to do to analyse that? What I'm going to do is actually create an instrument. And if you, people, Survey Monkey, very easy to do. You write your own, just fill them in. Okay, I'm going to have write a thing on question types. And I'm going to analyse that. Produce that as a report. That report is then linked to that video. If you wanted to, you can then export it. If you wanted to do, for example, forms, you write your own lesson, you write your own forms that you want to do. That was outstanding, but the key is it was outstanding between that point and that point on the video. You can then export that, PDF or CSV. If you wanted to, you can then email that to somebody else on the system, and they just click on that link and it takes them to that exact point in the video. So you're really getting something very, very constructive going on there. So I'm not going to go on much any longer because we're running out of time, and I want to know if people have got questions. So, I mean, there was a whole logical set behind what was produced. It wasn't a question of we wanted to build a camera, and we want to find a use for it, or we've got a camera, we want to find a use for it. We started off from the point of we know what we want to achieve, which is more effective professional development for staff. What are the key components within professional development for staff? What are the key interactions that make effective development for staff? Okay, then we'll design a system around that, and that's what we landed up with IRIS. And we're currently evaluating its impact in lots of different ways, and it's turning out to be really very significant. So, questions or issues raised?
No, I was going to start clapping. Do you want to use the mic or shall I just? Okay. One of the early research pieces that you showed on your slides was the Hattie research.
Yeah.
And you talked about the changing teachers to be the low-hanging fruit. And one of the smaller segments was the leadership, the particular head teacher. So my question, because I think that all of this, what happens in a school is largely empowered by a head teacher owning it and taking the decision to go forward with technology or process like this. So does this system encourage the head teacher to get involved as well? Bearing in mind as well your own experience.
Right. Two things. One, there was a bit of research by Robinson, wasn't there, which looked at actions of head teachers and what had the most impact. And what was shown to have the most impact by a head teacher was the amount of time they focused upon the professional development of their staff. So Hattie's research is actually, I think it's very valuable, but it actually, okay, the impact of the head teacher is that bit, but actually that bit can influence something else as well. So I mean, it's more circular than that. So yeah, I mean, the head teacher is the leader of a school. Let's go into definitions of that. But in being a leader of a school, what is it they're actually achieving? And I think if they invest within CPD, then that's what you're actually looking at there.
Often people take that Hattie research very literally and kind of leave the head teacher out and throw all the investment on teachers, which can't possibly work.
No.
So, excellent answer, thank you.
Thanks. I think the technology looks amazing. And I'm working teacher training myself now, and I won't tell you where I'm from, but we've already had a discussion about IRIS coming in, and the response was mixed. because when you talked about the circle before and the model and collaboration being an important element for outstanding teaching and development, that's a model that's cultural and organisational, isn't it, before you get to the point. So to start talking about perhaps introducing a video in the classroom, although that at its most useful point does encourage that people look, they share, you can not let people in or let people in, but an organisational sense of that culture of, you know, are we being watched, and is there support, is that part of this? And that, I think, would need to be developed before the video went in, before Irish as a concept was introduced. It relies on a sense of, you know, that people do feel supported and that collaboration already exists.
But you're making an assumption that schools are one culture all the way through. There's a dominant culture within any organisation.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to shift the culture within an organisation, you pick out those spots which are ready for change. So our advice on actually implementing it within a school is do not implement it as a school-wide process. Take out your 4 teachers, your 2 triads, your 3 triads, whatever it is. You work with them and you actually have a project management approach, which is we know the eventual good that will come, but we're going to get there through a series of processes. So what we actually do is we work with a group of people here who have a communications plan, talk about their success, they advertise their success, and then they move gradually on. You know, if you're waiting for the whole school or an organisation to catch up culturally, you're never going to move.
I agree with that, and I do think that it is part of the development process, isn't it? In terms of the technology, I do think that it's excellent, and it's got so many that I could see now working in observations for teacher training. But already an observation in teacher training is not a popular mode in a trainee teacher's life. And if it was via video, even then, that's when it's developmental, and although there are gradings and things attached now, it's still a sense of worry, and I think it's the video itself and the technology itself needs to be part of a greater organisational approach. Whether or not that's small or whole, it's still...
I totally, absolutely agree with you, because for me, I actually think Irish Connect ultimately is very disruptive technology, because it changes relationships within a school, and I think that's actually what it's intended to do and what it should do. I can totally empathise with the idea, if you bring something else like this, you actually see it as part of an accountability framework, which is why I spend so much time talking about it's the empowerment framework for teachers, and that's where I actually believe it comes from. And it's up to senior managers within a school or somewhere else to have a very, very sensitive and intelligent approach to the adoption to things like this.
Yes, I think the fact that your school had a discussion about it and realised some of the problems is important in itself. And I think by using this equipment to raise some of those issues is very important. And it is very dangerous if it's used for purely observation. Yeah. But you're well aware of all those issues.
Yeah,
so do stop and chat to Graham. We'd be very pleased if you do. And you do know that there's coffee and biscuits around there if you need some sustenance. And our next session is, we have a look at 2:15 to 2:45, and I hope lots of people